Okay, so, we're always getting messages and emails from you guys, and one thing that just keeps coming up over and over and over is, just understanding and healing from just difficult relationships.
Right.
And specifically, what's often called narcissistic abuse. So,
Yeah. And you've sent in some just incredibly important material,
yeah, why?
that really gets at this.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so important.
and so many people are dealing with this. And I think it's great that we're going to do a deep dive into this today.
Yeah, I think so too. And so, the material you said is really fascinating. And what I thought was really striking about it was how it just goes right to the core of it.
Right.
It's not just identifying a problem, it's actually saying, like, here's a pathway forward.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do in this deep dive is kind of extract like the key insights and like the practical steps for you, whether
Right.
you're in a challenging relationship right now, or maybe you're trying to find your way out of one, or even if you're recovering from one, because the material really emphasizes that, this is a process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to resonate with a lot of people listening is the way this source material
Mm-hmm.
really makes it clear that the effects of these relationships can last
Right.
long after the relationship is over.
Absolutely.
It's not just about the time you spend in the relationship. It's about
Right.
the patterns and the beliefs that can kind of get,
Right. Yeah.
baked in as a result of that experience.
It's like the shadow of the relationship
Oh, yeah.
extends far beyond
Absolutely.
the time that you spent in it. So, okay, so let's get into it, like, right off the bat. Like, the material kind of lays out some key indicators. Like, how do we even know
Right.
if what we're experiencing is this, what is narcissistic abuse?
Yeah, I love that.
Like, how do we know
Yeah.
that's what we're dealing with?
I love that the text goes right into, like, what does it feel like?
Yeah.
Right. So it gets very practical right away. And it talks about, if you're in this relationship
Yeah.
consistently, do you feel pain rather than joy?
Right.
And that's huge, right? Because healthy relationships, even if you have your ups and downs,
Right.
should generally bring a sense of well-being.
Yeah. It shouldn't feel bad all the time.
Right.
If it feels bad all the time,
Right.
there's a problem.
Something's wrong.
Yeah.
It also talks about feeling that drain of energy after you interact with your partner.
Right.
That feeling of being emotionally depleted,
Right.
almost like they've taken something from you.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, we had a disagreement and, now we both need to, go to our corners and,
Right.
kind of cool down or whatever. It's like something has been like sucked out of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it mentions this constant guilt.
Right.
Like, feeling like your emotions are always too much or your
Right.
opinions are invalid.
Right.
Like that really gets under your skin and just kind of chips away at you.
But it's almost like this manufactured guilt,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
designed to keep you
Off balance.
off balance and keep you constantly seeking their approval,
Right.
to alleviate that feeling.
Right. So it's about control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It goes on.
Go.
It means we kind of connect this to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
It's not just about these isolated instances of conflict, but it's
Yeah.
talking about a pattern of always putting
Yeah.
the other person's needs ahead of your own.
Yes.
That constant overextending yourself
Yeah.
just to earn a little bit of praise or validation.
Just like you're constantly,
Right.
jumping through hoops to
Yeah.
try to please them and get their approval.
Yeah.
And then,
And then there's that fear of abandonment,
oh my gosh.
right? That keeps
Yeah, it's huge.
you stuck
Yeah.
in that situation,
Right.
walking on eggshells,
Right. Just constantly trying to just trying to please.
manage their mood and
Yeah.
please them. Yeah. And then this thing about like your self-esteem becoming completely reliant on someone else's opinion.
Right.
And specifically their opinion.
Right.
That's such a precarious position to be in
Right.
because
And what the text is saying is if several of these things are ringing true for you,
right.
it's a pretty strong sign that this is a toxic relationship.
And I love how it just says like flat out, like,
Mhm.
if these things resonate with you,
Right.
you might be in a toxic relationship.
Right.
And I think, for our listener, like
Yeah.
as you're hearing these indicators, like what's resonating with
Yeah. What are you noticing?
you? What feels familiar?
Yeah, what feels familiar and
Yeah.
just acknowledging that, you might be in this situation, I think is like a huge step.
Absolutely.
And what I think is so interesting is that
Yeah.
the material doesn't stop at just identifying it. It makes this really important point that I think is so important to grasp,
Yeah.
which is that the abuse doesn't magically vanish
Right.
the moment the relationship is over.
That's right. The text really emphasizes
it can still have.
that even after the person is no longer physically present,
Yeah.
the patterns of thinking and behaving that they instilled
Right.
can continue to have a powerful hold.
Yes.
It's like they've programmed certain responses
Yeah.
within you,
Yeah.
and those things keep running.
Yeah, it's like the ghost in the machine.
Right.
You know, they're not there, but they're still there.
Yeah.
You know, and the patterns are so damaging.
Right.
You know, it talks specifically about dependence on approval,
Okay.
codependence,
Yeah.
and self-gaslighting. Can you talk about those for a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, think about it. These often develop as survival mechanisms
Right.
in the abusive dynamic.
Yeah.
Right. So dependence on approval, you know, that can be a way to maintain a sense of safety or predictability
Right.
when your own feelings and needs are constantly dismissed or invalidated.
Right. It's like you lose trust in your own
Or you
judgment.
start to doubt yourself.
Yeah, and
And
they're
you-
looking to them
For to tell you what's right.
yeah, to tell you like
Right.
you know how to feel or
Right.
what's okay.
And then codependence,
Right. That's a big one.
which is that excessive reliance on the other person
Right.
for your sense of worth and identity.
Right.
You know, that often develops because your own needs are constantly ignored,
Yeah.
and you start to prioritize their needs as a way to
To maintain peace.
maintain the connection or avoid conflict.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then there's this whole self-gaslighting thing,
Right. Yeah.
which is where you actually start to doubt
yeah
your own
your own reality.
reality, right? Because they're consistently
Studying it.
denying or distorting
Yeah.
what you know to be true.
Yeah, and so you're just like
And so it's this way of trying to reconcile their version of events
right.
with your own experience, and often at the expense of your own sanity.
Yeah, your own well-being. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these patterns, they don't just
And here's the thing.
yeah.
They don't just disappear.
right
They can easily carry over
into future relationships.
in a future relationship.
Right. And set you up for
Some-
more of the same.
Unless you actively address them.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless you do the work to unpack all this.
That's why recovery is so important.
yes.
It's not just about getting out of one relationship. It's about breaking free from these underlying dynamics
Right.
that drew you into it in the first place, and that could lead you
100%.
into another one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So understanding these patterns is the
Right.
first step. But then the question is like, okay,
What do you do about it?
yeah, what do you do about it?
What do you do about it?
And the source material points us to a solution here,
Yeah.
which is Warless Material Story webinar,
Yeah.
5 steps to Jim.
5 steps to Elmashe,
5 steps to Emma.
narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, so this webinar
Yeah.
is a key resource here.
It seems to be.
And it's happening tomorrow,
Right.
either at $10 a.m. or 6:00 p.m.
Yeah.
Moscow time,
Moscow time. If you're listening,
if that works for you.
and that works for you,
Yeah.
how do people find this and sign up for it?
The text directs us to the website, Tornulans.
Okay.
It's an educational platform
Okay.
where various experts in psychology and self-development and personal growth, share their knowledge and resources.
Okay.
So that's where you can find the registration for a
Right.
webinar. And it sounds like
Yeah.
it's a very focused and
Sure.
practical.
Event that's designed to offer concrete steps.
Awesome. So at the heart of it is this idea of 5 steps.
Right.
So let's get into the 5 steps because this
Okay.
is where it becomes really actionable for you, the
Yeah.
listener.
Yeah.
So the first step is emotional liberation.
Right.
And I think that's so interesting. Like, what does that even mean, practically speaking?
Yeah. So I think the important thing here is emotional liberation means starting to detach emotionally
Okay.
from the narcissist,
Regardless of whether
regardless of whether or not
the person is still there.
they're still physically present.
Right.
Because what happens is even after the physical separation,
Yeah.
the emotional residue,
Right.
the anger, the sadness, the confusion, all of that
Right.
can keep you very much tied to the experience.
Yeah.
So this first step is about actively starting to untangle those cords.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this might involve things like, mindfulness
Okay.
or consciously, limiting the amount of mental energy you spend on replaying past events.
Yeah. Just recognizing that emotional hold might still be there,
Right.
even though the person is.
Even if they're not around anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So step 2
Step 2.
is removing what keeps you attached.
Yeah.
And so I think, we talked about the emotional ties, but like what else?
Right. Well, the text talks about fear.
Yeah.
The fear of not being able to cope on your own,
Right.
the fear of being alone,
Right.
and also that feeling of helplessness
Right.
that can come with this kind of abuse.
Yeah.
Right. And so
You feel powerless.
you feel powerless, and that can create this really strong pull
Back to the familiar.
back to the familiar, even if it's unhealthy.
Even if it's unhealthy.
Right.
Right.
So this step is about shifting your emotional state.
Okay.
It's about cultivating that sense of inner security and capability.
Right.
So you don't feel so afraid.
Yeah. So you're not driven by fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
So this might involve things like, building new skills.
Okay.
Or reconnecting with your own strengths.
Right. Like remembering who you are
Yeah.
apart from this relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Step 3.
Step 3, learning to resist.
This is a big one.
Well, this is huge. And I feel like this is all about setting boundaries, right?
Absolutely. The text talks about how difficult it is for people
Right.
who have been through this kind of abuse
Yeah.
to assert themselves, to
Right.
say no,
Right.
to recognize manipulation, to
Yeah.
resist it,
Yeah.
and to really create healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So this step is all about reclaiming your personal power.
Yes.
It's about learning to identify those patterns
Yes.
for what they are
Right.
and developing that confidence to push back
And the skill.
and protect yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It's about regaining control
Right.
over your own life and your own decisions.
You're taking back that control.
Yeah.
Okay, so step 4.
Creating an exit plan.
This is big. Yeah. And there's a really important caveat here. The text says, don't allude the narcissist to your intentions
Yeah.
prematurely.
Why is that
Why is that?
so important?
Well, think about it from their perspective.
Yeah.
Any perceived threat to their control
Right.
or to their ego
Yeah.
can be met with intense manipulation or even retaliation.
Right.
Right.
You don't want to poke the bear.
You don't want to poke the bear.
Yeah.
So
Do you need a plan?
this step is about developing a strategy,
Right.
right? And it needs to be tailored
Yeah.
to your specific situation,
Yeah.
taking into account the dynamics of the relationship,
Yeah.
your personality,
Yeah.
your living situation,
Right.
your support systems,
Right.
all of it,
All of that. Yeah.
right? So it needs to be well thought out
Right.
and discreet
Right.
to ensure your safety.
Safety first.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay, and then finally,
Step 5, building a new life without narcissists.
right, and this isn't just about getting them out of your life physically.
Right.
The text really stresses
Yeah.
that it's not enough to just remove them
Yeah.
from your environment.
Yeah.
There's active work involved
Right.
in rebuilding your sense of self,
Right.
rediscovering your own values and interests,
Yes.
and creating a healthier and more fulfilling life.
Yes.
Just
So
let-
because otherwise, if you don't intentionally create new settings,
Yeah.
new routines, new connections,
Yeah.
you run the risk of being drawn back in
Right back into the same pattern.
or attracting similar dynamics in the
Yes.
future.
Yes, so it's about building a new life,
It's about building a new life.
not just escaping the old one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And throughout all of these 5 steps,
Yeah.
the webinar seems to emphasize this idea of support.
Yeah. Because that feeling of being alone,
Oh my man.
not being able to cope,
Yeah.
is a huge hurdle
For so many.
for so many people.
Yeah.
And the text really acknowledges that. Yeah.
And it highlights that the webinar is designed to provide not just information,
Right.
but also a sense of help and support
Right.
in building that inner strength.
Yeah.
So you don't feel like you have to do this alone.
Yeah. Because it's so hard to
yeah.
do it alone.
Yeah. And the ultimate goal,
Yeah.
as the text puts it, is to empower you to become the
Yeah.
owner of your own life.
Yes.
Making choices
Yeah.
based on your own needs and interests,
Yes.
not on someone else's agenda.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Navel for
Yeah.
a minute.
Yeah.
Egeve Eru.
Her background and credentials sound really extensive.
Yeah, she's got quite a resume.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is the breadth of her experience.
Yeah.
She's a qualified psychologist.
Okay.
She's a certified mindfulness instructor,
Wow.
trained in multiple practices.
Yeah.
And she's the author of over 20
Wow.
different training programs and courses. That's incredible.
So that really speaks to a comprehensive understanding of
I-
human behavior,
Right.
emotional well-being,
Yeah.
and therapeutic approaches.
Yeah. And then she has a YouTube channel, which I think is so cool. What kind of topics does she focus on there?
Her YouTube channel focuses on the impact of childhood trauma,
Okay.
particularly complex PTSD,
Okay.
and she also provides resources
Yeah.
and insights for navigating addictions
Right.
and codependent relationships.
And so much of that overlaps, with the
Yeah.
experience of people who've been in these relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it seems like she's really,
Right.
coming at this
Yeah.
with a very specific
Yeah.
understanding of what people have been through.
Right.
And what's also interesting is that,
And she's trained with some really big names in the field.
yeah,
Peter Cummings,
right,
who's a partner of Bessel van der Kolk,
right,
a leading figure in trauma research,
yeah,
and also Tom Cronin from
Yeah.
Mind Valley,
okay, yeah,
known for his work in mindfulness and personal growth.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it seems like she's really committed to learning
yeah,
from the forefront of trauma-informed care
Yeah.
and personal development.
yeah. So I think that, that speaks to her credibility
Absolutely.
and to the fact that this webinar
Yeah.
is probably, you know, grounded and solid.
Yeah, it's not just some
Yeah.
fly-by-night thing,
Right. Yeah. It's not just like somebody's opinion. It's like, she's really
Right, was on
grounded
research this and
on research and on best practices.
why exactly. So the call to action here for you, the listener,
Yeah.
is pretty clear.
Yeah.
If this is resonating with you,
Yeah. If this is speaking to you.
if you're recognizing some of these patterns in your own life,
Yeah.
the material strongly encourages you to consider
Yeah.
attending this free webinar.
It's a great place to start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as a first step.
So how do they do that? How do they sign up?
They need to go to Choi,
Okay.
that's the website,
Okay.
and they can find Choi's webinar there
Great.
and register for one of the sessions.
Awesome. And I think, what's also cool is that,
And what's really neat is
Yeah.
that platform
Right.
offers other events and resources
Yeah.
from different experts in personal growth.
so it's a good place to
Kind of
go.
to find more information and support.
Yeah. To find
Yeah.
more information and support.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I
Yeah.
think the material you shared really lays out
It
a
does.
clear and insightful framework
Absolutely.
for understanding
Yeah.
this very complex and often insidious thing
Right.
that's called narcissistic abuse.
Yeah.
And crucially, it goes beyond just identification
Yeah.
and actually offers concrete steps
Right.
and, a very available resource,
Absolutely.
this free webinar
Right.
to actually take action
That's the important part.
and move towards healing.
It's about taking action.
Yes.
Yeah.
And building a healthier future.
Yeah, and what's really powerful here is that emphasis on the long-lasting effects
Right.
of this kind of abuse
Yeah.
and the need to engage in active healing.
Yeah.
It's
It's not just going to go away.
not just going to go away on its own.
Right.
You have to do something.
You have to do the work. Yeah.
You have to do the work.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
those
sure.
5 steps
Yeah.
provide a map.
Yeah.
And the webinar is there to support you
Right.
on that journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a great place to end. But yeah.
But one final thought.
Yeah.
While we've been talking about romantic relationships
Right.
in the context of narcissistic abuse,
Yeah.
think about how some of these patterns
Oh, that's so interesting.
might be showing up
Yeah.
in other areas of your life.
Right. Like friendships.
Friendships, family dynamics,
Yeah.
even in your relationship with yourself.
Right.
That tendency to seek external validation,
Right.
the difficulty setting boundaries,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
self-doubt,
Right.
those things can show up
Everywhere.
in lots of different places.
Yeah.
So it's really
It's
about,
worth exploring that.
looking at the bigger picture of
Yeah.
your life
Yeah. Yeah.
and seeing if any of this resonates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so important
That's a great point.
because I think sometimes we can get so focused on
Right.
like the romantic
The
relationship,
one relationship.
but actually
Yeah.
these patterns can play out
They can be everywhere.
in so many different areas of our lives.
Yeah.
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 Great food for thought.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been really fascinating.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.